Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really pull apart some fascinating sources and bring you the core insights.
Exactly. And today, we're focusing exclusively on one specific text.
That's right, session 83 of the Law of One. It's incredibly dense, packed with information.
It really is. So our mission, if you will, is to walk through this session question by question.
Yeah, digging deep for that, insightful and positive understanding that's really there.
And just as a reminder for everyone, the source is this conversation between the questioner, Don Elkins, and Ra.
Raw being a social memory complex, sixth density, it's quite a concept.
It is. And session 83 gives us this amazing chance to get detailed explanations on things like the veil.
That cosmic forgetting we all experience.
Right. And catalyst those things that push us to grow
Mm-mm.
and just the whole nature of life in third density.
Especially the differences before and after this veil came into being.
So yeah, get ready for a very detailed question-by-question exploration.
Let's dive right in. Question 1, 83.1. Could you first please give the condition of the instrument? Pretty standard start.
Yep. And Ra's answer is just as concise. It is as previously stated.
Okay, so basically, Carla, the channel, is stable, consistent with past sessions.
Exactly. It sets the stage, confirms the connection is clear. A good baseline.
All right, question 2, 83.2. This one's more physical. Could you please tell me why the instrument gains weight now instead of loses it after a session?
It's a practical question, isn't it? And Ryan gives a really interesting answer. They say the weight gain isn't actually from the session itself.
Not from the contact with Ra.
No, because the group made a conscious effort to conserve Carla's vital energy. So Ra isn't drawing on her physical substance for the communication.
Okay, so if it's not the channeling, then what's causing it?
Ra points to two things. First, her physical body, her vehicle, has become much more sensitive,
Sensitive to what? Like everything.
pretty much, including allergens. And second, these sensitivities, these difficulties are being sort of energized.
Amplified. Ah, so it's like her body's reactions are just stronger now.
Exactly. And Ray adds something quite telling. It's fortunate she isn't prone to overeating,
Why's that?
because with this heightened sensitivity, overeating could have really severe health impacts for her, even with positive affirmations trying to counteract it.
Wow. It really shows how interconnected the physical and energetic aspects were for the instrument.
Definitely. Which brings us to 83.3. This is a big one.
Yeah, it's a long question asking about all the major differences before and after the veil. Sleep, dreams, pain, both physical and mental sex, disease, catalyst.
Relationships, communication with the higher self, other beings. The whole shebang, basically.
So how does Ray tackle such a massive question?
They start with a really crucial clarification. The basic conditions, the stage of time and space, existed both before and after the veil.
Okay, so the universe didn't fundamentally change its structure?
Not in that way. The veiling was an event within space-time. What changed dramatically was the character of our experience.
Qualitatively different, not quantitatively.
Precisely. Ra uses dreams as a key example. Before the veil, dreams were less about our subconscious and more about actual learning,
Learning? How so?
like direct teaching sessions
Yeah,
with entities from inner planes, higher densities. Imagine getting lessons while you sleep.
that is completely different from how we think of dreams now.
Right. Ra says the veiling is why dreams now have the value they do for processing unconscious catalyst. But it also created that barrier to the higher self.
The veil obscures that direct connection.
Yes. Then Ra uses sexual activity as another detailed example. Before the veil, there was energy transfer, but it was often weaker, more diffuse,
Why weaker?
because there wasn't the veil. In third density, a key lesson is love. But without the veil, seeing the oneness in everyone made it, well, maybe harder for less disciplined souls to focus love and service intensely on one partner.
Interesting. So the energy might have been spread out more, less focused.
That's what Ra suggests.
Yeah.
Maybe dispersed more randomly without the intense highs and lows we associate with it now.
And the green ray transfer, that heart energy.
It remains somewhat weak, harder to really crystallize without the focused effort that the veil sort of encourages or even necessitates.
Okay, so what changed after the veil regarding sex?
Things became way more complex, more potential for blockages, more mental and emotional layers involved. But it also became a much more efficient path for crystallizing consciousness, especially for those seeking the Green Ray Center, seeking that deep, compassionate love.
So the added complexity, the challenges, actually became powerful tools for growth in that area.
Exactly. The obstacles themselves became the catalyst. It's a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. The veil creating both the forgetting and the potential for more potent remembering, in a way.
Well put. Which leads to question 83.4, focusing specifically on sex and disease. Was venereal disease in existence prior to the veil?
A direct and potentially uncomfortable question for some.
True, but important for understanding the shift. Ross says disease generally existed before and after.
Okay, so illness wasn't new.
Correct. But venereal disease, Ross states, is largely a function of distorted thought forms and sexual energy blockages.
Ah, so it's tied more closely to the mind-body-spirit interactions that became prominent after the veil.
Almost entirely, according to Ra. The conditions created by the veil seem to be the primary soil for it.
That's a significant distinction. Then 83.5 asks, okay, if it existed even slightly before, what was its source then?
Ra explains the source was basically random, like other disease distortions. They frame disease generally as a natural reversal of the body's constant growth process.
A reversal.
Yeah, like its function, pre-veil, was seen as benign, simply ending an incarnation when it reached a natural conclusion point in that life's journey.
So not punishment, but just part of the cycle.
That seems to be the perspective. And this applied to all diseases then, including what we now call venereal disease, before the veil added those extra layers of thought and feeling around sexuality.
That's a radically different view of illness. Okay, 83.6 is the questioner summarizing this idea about the logos plan.
Right, the idea that the mind's growth is mirrored by the body, and when mental growth slows, disease might end the physical life to allow review and a fresh start.
And Ra's response.
Your thinking is sufficiently clear on this subject. A concise affirmation.
So the cycle of learning, incarnation, review, and rebirth is kind of confirmed there. But then 83.7 raises a good point.
Yeah, why would you need an incarnation review if there was no veil? Wouldn't you already be aware of everything as it happened?
Seems logical, right?
It does, but Ra draws a subtle line between awareness during the experience and understanding after. They say a lifetime can be seen whole, like a book you've finished reading.
Okay.
But the review isn't just studying the book again. It's more like testing your comprehension of it. Synthesis.
So even if you were aware moment to moment, the review gives you the bigger picture.
Precisely. During life, you're in the thick of it, focused on details. The review, often with guidance, lets you step back and see the patterns.
The sum total, the attitudes and biases that shape that life.
Exactly. It's about perspective, seeing the forest, not just the trees you are navigating.
That makes a lot of sense, like analyzing the data after the experiment. Okay, 83.8, the airplane simulator analogy.
The questioner suggests pre-veil entities, knowing they were connected to everything bolted to creation, might have felt life was less real, like a simulation.
Because the stakes felt lower, maybe? Knowing you're fundamentally safe?
Kind of, and they ask if this is a reasonable comparison for the experiential shift. Ross says yes, it's a reasonable analogy for the experiential difference.
Okay, so it captures something about how life felt different.
Yes, the shift from conscious connection and safety to our veiled sense of separation and vulnerability. But Ra clarifies, this analogy is about the experience, not about the function of the incarnation review.
Got it. The review is still valuable regardless of how real the preceding life felt. Next, 83.9 asks for a specific example of pre-veil disease and reaction.
And Ra basically says, look, consciousness is infinitely diverse. Giving one example wouldn't capture the reality.
Too many variables.
Exactly. They point to how differently people on Earth react to the same illness now. Imagine that diversity amplified across infinite pre-veil experiences.
Fair point. Okay, 83.0 shifts to societies. Were pre-veil societies uniform in any way?
Ra says third density is inherently social. Societies form wherever there's self-awareness, other awareness, and intelligence.
So societies existed, but were they similar?
They were varied, but here's the crucial difference Ra highlights. They did not depend on intentional enslavement.
Because everyone knew they were one.
Fundamentally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
That understanding would make intentional exploitation for the benefit of a few inherently contradictory to their reality.
Wow, a society built on inherent respect. That's hard to even imagine fully.
It is. But Ra does add there was still enough disharmony or disagreement to lead to experiments with different government structures. Learning was still happening.
Right, not a utopia, but fundamentally different. Okay, 83.11 brings it to our present illusion. The questioner suggests we've lost sight of enslavement techniques.
And that even service to others people might be using them unconsciously now because they're so deeply embedded in our veiled systems.
And Ra's response.
Initially, this is incorrect. But that's key. Ra's referring to the time before the veil in that first answer.
Okay. The questioner clarifies in 83.1, asking about now, are service to others people now using these techniques unintentionally?
And now Rod clarifies. Before the veil, no, that kind of unconscious slavery didn't really exist. But currently,
Yes.
Ross's well-meant unintentional forms of slavery are so numerous, they're hard to even count.
Oof, that's sobering. Things we do with good intentions might still limit others.
Exactly. Which leads right into 83.13. Should service to others people meditate on these unexpected forms of slavery? Would that help polarization?
And Ra's answer.
You're quite correct. A strong affirmation. Self-reflection on how we might inadvertently limit freedom is crucial for positive polarization.
Makes sense. Question 83.14 then points directly at our legal systems.
Yeah, the questioner suggests a high percentage of laws are a form of this subtle enslavement.
Does Rhett agree?
They acknowledge the paradox. Laws intend to protect, but often distort towards restriction and imprisonment, literal or otherwise. So, yes, they concur.
But they add a caveat, right?
Yes. Importantly, they say this isn't to knock the good intentions of those trying to create order out of chaos. It's just pointing out the almost inevitable result of rigid, codified responses that don't account for individual uniqueness.
A really nuanced take on systems versus individuals. Okay, 83.15 is simple. Is the veil semi-permeable?
And the answer is equally simple. The veil is indeed so.
Good to know. Which brings us to 83.16. What techniques were planned for penetrating it? Were there unplanned ways too?
This is fascinating. Ross says the veiling was an experiment, a naked hypothesis. No penetration techniques were planned because the outcome wasn't known.
So how did we figure out how to pierce it?
Experientially. Ross says the ways to penetrate it are as numerous as the imagination allows.
Wow, so anything is possible.
It seems so. The desire to know the unknown drew people towards exploring dreams, seeking inner balance, opening up to guidance from teach learners.
Like channeling.
Presumably, yes, and other, maybe less obvious, activities of the self. But Ra highlights one avenue as the most vivid and extravagant,
Which is?
the interaction of polarized entities,
Yeah.
people strongly aligned, working together.
Okay, 83.17 asks for more on that. Interaction of polarized entities. How does that work?
Ra points out the extreme potential when two entities dedicated to the same path, service to others, or sometimes service to self, come together.
Like a focusing lens?
Kind of. And there's a doubling effect. Those seeking together find, much more surely, their efforts amplify each other.
Spiritual synergy. So 83.18 asks for the specific technique or process they use to penetrate the veil.
Ra explains it starts with cultivating green ray activity.
That heart-centered, compassionate, non-demanding love.
Exactly. Walking that path activates and crystallizes the higher energy centers.
Yeah.
Eventually, the adept emerges.
The person with inner mastery.
Right. And within the adept lies the potential to dismantle the veil, bit by bit, allowing the perception of oneness to return.
And the role of the partner.
In this specific path, the other self, the polarized partner, acts as a primary catalyst in that journey. Love is literally the key.
Love as the mechanism for unlocking reality. Incredible. Okay, 83.12. Back to basics. What was the mechanism of the very first veiling?
Ra's answer is so simple yet profound. The mechanism was a declaration that the mind was complex.
Just a declaration, a thought.
It seems so. That declaration, that belief in complexity, then rippled outward, causing the body and spirit to also become complex in our perception.
Our belief in separation created the separation. Mind-blowing. So 83.20 asks for an example. What's a complex body activity now that wasn't complex before?
Ra says before the veil, people had conscious control over things we consider totally involuntary now.
Like what?
Blood pressure, heartbeat, even the intensity of pain, all consciously managed.
Full conscious control over the body. That's hard to grasp. Which leads to 83.21. The questioner guessing the logos must have had a list.
Yeah, a list of what would become unconscious, for good reasons, but Ra's answer.
Let me guess. No.
Bingo. No.
Okay, so 83.22. Please correct me.
Ra explains it wasn't one master plan. There were many experiments, veiling different functions in different ways.
Trial and error.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Many attempts resulted in bodies that weren't viable, or barely viable. Like, unconsciously blanking out all pain isn't great for survival, right?
Right, you need the signal. Which brings us back to pain in 83.23. Before the veil, the mind could blank it out. Was its only function then just a warning signal?
Ra confirms the mental control aspect, yes. And its function was like that fire alarm, a warning signal to prompt action.
And then you could turn it off mentally once you'd acted.
Exactly. 83.24 gives the example. Burn your hand, pull it away. then mentally stop the pain while it heals.
And Ra confirms.
Erect.
So 83.25 is us looking back from our current perspective. We'd see that ability to turn off pain as losing catalyst, right? Losing a chance for growth.
Ross's attitudes towards pain vary, but the questioner's view that pain as catalyst is productive for evolution, now Ra calls that a helpful distortion.
Helpful distortion, meaning it's useful for us now in the veil, but not the only truth.
That's how it sounds. It serves our current evolutionary process.
Okay, so 83.26 asks if the Logos plan, by veiling that conscious pain control, essentially created this new system of catalyst.
And Ra affirms, yes. Making pain less controllable opened up a new avenue for growth.
Which brings us to the last big question, 83.27. Sometimes this catalyst seems runaway, doesn't it? People experiencing immense pain, seemingly more than they can use.
A very real and difficult observation. Ra acknowledges this is the last full query.
And their explanation.
They say some people, either by pre-birth choice or choices in life, develop a real hunger for catalyst, an esurient program, Ra calls it.
Hungry for challenges.
Yes, believing they need significant trials for self-awareness. To outsiders, their suffering might seem tragic, wasted even.
But from their soul's perspective.
Ra hopes the self is grasping the catalyst it chose for its own evolution. It's a deeply personal process.
A challenging but compassionate perspective on suffering. Okay, the final bits, 83.28, are about logistics. I versus we communicate now.
Ra explains it's just grammatical difficulty with English. For a unified complex like Ra, singular versus plural doesn't map well. I is simpler.
Makes sense. And tips for the instrument's comfort.
Yes, respecting free will, Ra suggests liquids might be helpful, that Carla is increasingly sensing what her body needs, and affirmations are good.
Practical advice.
And they ask the group to offer easily digestible proteins if she wants them, noting her capacity for distortion if needed. Then thanks, notes on the setup being aligned.
And the usual closing. Wow, what a session.
It truly is. Session 83 covers so much ground: the veil's impact on dreams, sex, pain, society.
The nature of disease changing, the purpose of incarnation review.
The idea of pre-veil societies without intentional enslavement is just staggering.
And then how to pierce the veil, especially through love and polarized relationships. That's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the whole complex discussion on catalyst, even seemingly excessive pain, having a potential purpose chosen by the self.
Plus, you see the care involved in the contact itself, looking out for the instrument's well-being.
It's incredibly rich. So maybe the thought to leave you with is this.
Yeah.
How does understanding the veil catalyst and these pre- and post-veil differences, as laid out here, how might that reframe how you see your own life, your challenges, your growth?
That's definitely something to sit with. A lot to contemplate there.
For sure. It shifts your perspective.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing merrily in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator. Namaste.
I am you, and you are me.